Picture it in slow motion. The U-Hauls idling like beasts ready to feast. The landlord's son brimming with entitlement. The daughter expecting a Pinterest dream. Door opens. The oxygen changes. Their faces fall in tandem. The realization that the house they wanted doesn't exist anymore. Not like this. Not for them. They stare down a gallery of absence. The ghost of a castle where there's only primer. The echo of a sea where there's only gray. No tantrum. No dramatic meltdown. Just the humiliation of getting exactly what you asked for. Ownership without soul. They back away, hands empty, and drive off with trucks full of furniture that no longer belongs anywhere. That's the sound of justice. Brakes releasing, engines fading, and a neighborhood that refuses to let cruelty keep trophies. Sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's subtraction. It's taking back what can't be priced, time, care, artistry, and leaving your enemy with what they value most, possession. Let them own the shell. We'll keep the story. If this gave you chills, tap that like button and share it with someone who's been pushed around by people with too much power and too little heart. Drop a comment. Would you have done the same or gone even further? And the last project, the facade. Rebecca originally wanted to leave it. It was her favorite part. Her compromise with the outside world. But then the landscaping guy, Jace, a friend of Marco's, offered a trade. He'd remove the facade carefully, keep the bushes, and redo the front for the cost of labor, free. Take it, Rebecca said. I don't want them wearing my face. So we unhooked the arch trim, unbolted the whimsical window boxes, and carried each piece like a fragile limb. Without the costume, the house's true bones showed, a squat ranch with nothing to say. Jace ripped out the bushes, pulled up the cottage stones, and dumped clean gravel with a single dramatic boulder, like a punctuation mark in the middle of a dull sentence. It wasn't ugly. It was nothing. We left them the most expensive kind of nothing, the kind you can't love. The day after we finished, the street was strangely quiet. Even the birds seemed to pause, as if taking attendance and coming up one voice short. A few mornings later, I was fixing a light fixture for an older neighbor when I heard the punctuation of heavy tires and rattling ramps. 2 U-Hauls pulled up to the storybook. Except it wasn't the storybook anymore. The drivers sat with the engines idling. The landlord's son got out first, tan, hurried, Bluetooth in ear. The daughter hopped down, ponytail bouncing, excitement bundling in the corners of her mouth. They approached the front walk. He slowed. She didn't. She looked up at the flat face of the house where the cottage once smiled and stopped fast enough to jolt her shoulders. Confusion hit first. You could see her searching for the curve of the arch that wasn't there. He peered at the gravel, the boulder, the way the front window now stared back like an unblinking eye. He unlocked the door. It opened into grayness. I wish I could tell you they screamed. They didn't. Silence did a better job. The kind that makes your ears buzz. They stepped inside, swallowed by flat white light reflecting off semi-gloss. No murals. No vines. No ceiling clouds. Just walls that felt like waiting rooms. From across the street, behind a half-closed garage door, I watched their shoulders rise and fall, their heads pivot like owls. The daughter walked to the living room and put her hand on the wall like Rebecca once did. Her palm slid on paint that didn't bother to notice. She turned to her father. Her mouth formed words I couldn't hear. The father stood rigid, jaw tight, wealthy helplessness creeping up his neck like a rash. One driver hopped down from a truck, cracked his knuckles, grabbed a dolly, and waited for a signal that never came. The father glanced back at the U-Hauls, then into the house, then at his daughter. She shook her head once, hard. He gestured, tiny, resigned. They closed the door without ever crossing the threshold properly. The drivers idled. Then, one by one, they climbed back into their seats, put the trucks in gear, and left. The house exhaled an empty, flat breath. I didn't cheer. It wasn't that kind of moment. Instead, I thought about Rebecca in Marco's guest house, painting a new mural. Bold blues and oranges, a phoenix bursting from a gray wall. She'd sketched it the night we started sanding, hands moving with a certainty that made me feel reverent. She titled it Reclaimed. Later that week, I dropped by to see her. She was on a step stool, brush in her teeth, hair up with a pencil. The phoenix chest glowed like a sunrise that finally got the time it deserved. "How'd it go?" she asked without turning around. "They came," I said. "They left." She paused, then dabbed a highlight along a feather. "People don't always deserve the things they want," she murmured. "But they always deserve to meet themselves." "What does that mean?" She smiled at the wall. "They wanted a fairy tale written by someone else, while treating the author like she didn't exist. Now, they have a blank page. Let them write it. Or don't." I stood there, breathing in the clean sting of fresh paint, feeling the relief like a stretch after a cramped ride. I thought of the house, now a monument. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't always kind to Rebecca. That's what I'll call her here. Rebecca. She's the retired art teacher who lived 3 doors down from me in a house everyone around here called the Storybook. Inside was a museum of childhood, wall-to-wall murals of Disney forests, hand-painted castles, nursery rhyme clouds drifting across ceilings. Outside, a whimsical cottage facade, curved trim, window boxes, a little arched entry that looked stolen from a set designer's sketchbook. I drive a loud truck. Rebecca hated that truck. First time she complained, I gave her attitude. She didn't flinch. "Art is about harmony," she said, hands folded, smile polite. "And your engine note is an assault." I laughed. We worked it out. From then on, I eased past her house in low gear. She waved with 2 paint-splattered fingers. She had been there since the mid-'80s. The original landlord, old-school type, loved her work and promised, "When the time comes, we'll make it official." He'd let her build that fantasy world inside because it brought life to a dead street. He meant it, but promises, as I learned, die with people. When he passed, the property went to his kids, suits and sunglasses at the funeral, smiles too white, condolences too smooth. One of the sons, tailored jacket, expensive watch, came by to inspect the asset. He brought his daughter. You could hear their voices echo in the hall. The girl squealing over the murals, the son saying, "This is perfect. You'll love it." I watched from my driveway, forearms still dusty from work. Rebecca stood in the doorway clutching a rag like a white flag. Afterward, she walked over to me, face pale, mouth a straight line. "They want the house," she said. "What about your lease?" Her eyes dropped. It was always a handshake. My stomach punched inward. Handshakes don't hold up in court. 2 weeks later, the letter came. Non-renewal. Vacate within 30 days. Then, the insult. They cited unauthorized interior alterations. Her own murals. The very thing the daughter had fallen in love with. They used her art, the identity of the home, as a reason to strip her of it. That night I heard something I'd never heard from Rebecca. Full-body sobbing. The house had good acoustics. Curved arches carry sound. I stood on my porch in the dark, listening, fists tight enough to ache. No words, no speeches. Just the weight of a life collapsing. The next morning I knocked. She opened the door with eyes like wet paper. "I'll help," I said. "Whatever you need." "Thank you," she said. "I found something out of state. There's a little studio on the first floor. I can afford it, barely. I'll go." She let out a small breath that turned into a laugh. "I always thought I'd leave this house to my students. Instead, I'll leave it to strangers." "Not strangers," I said. "Vultures." The neighborhood moved like a muscle. We packed her life with the care of a museum restoration, bubble-wrapping brushes like relics, labeling paint jars like infant names. My friend Marco, pro painter, obsessively neat, offered his guest house for a while. "Free if you paint me something," he joked. She smiled for the first time in days. "Deal," she said. But there was still the house. She planned to leave the cottage facade, the landscaping, the whimsy, because it felt too much like cutting off a limb. "Let them have it," she whispered. "Maybe the girl will love it like I did." "No," Marco said softly. "They don't get your heart. Not anymore." I watched her process that, chin trembling, eyes darting as if counting invisible brushstrokes. Then she nodded once. A small, decisive click. Something in me unclenched. Marco had a plan, a petty plan, a perfect plan. He needed practice with a powered paint sprayer, the kind that turns walls into blank slates in 4 lazy passes. He'd restore the house, he said, to Rebecca's standard. Now, here's the inside joke. Around here, Rebecca condition became our sarcastic term for the flipper aesthetic invading the city. Blinding white, dull gray, soulless wood laminate. Everything smoothed until you can't find a heartbeat. We called it that because every time Rebecca walked past a flipped house, she'd sniff. It looks like a dentist office trying to be humble. She'd say it with a mischievous smile. So, yes, we would give the landlord's son exactly what he deserved. A house stripped of the very thing he stole it for. Week 2. We masked everything that wasn't supposed to be painted. Outlets, trim, switch covers. The house echoed without furniture, every footstep a hollow knock. The smell of dust and lemon cleaner hung in the hallway. I ran a sander along the edge of a hand-painted ivy vine, and flakes came away like confetti from a parade nobody celebrated anymore. Sure. I asked, eyes on Rebecca. She swallowed, stepped forward, and pressed the sander to the wall herself. The leaf dissolved under the pad with a whisper. She closed her eyes for just a second. When she opened them, they were steady. Let's finish the job. We moved room by room, mural by mural, snow-white forests, blue seas with hidden mermaids, a ceiling where clouds played peekaboo with bedtime stars. The sanders hummed like mosquitoes. Our shoulders burned. Our clothes got chalky with color ghosts. By evening, the house looked diseased, patches of color, bald spots, smears where magic used to be. Marco rolled out the sprayer, a beast with a silver hose and a motor that purred like a cat that eats Teslas. He loaded Kill's primer. For passes, he said, grinning, and it never existed. The first blast hit the living room and the wall went white in a breath. The primer covered like fog swallowing a lighthouse. Pass 1, Pass 2, mermaid tail gone. Pass 3, castle towers wiped. Pass 4, blank, like a page before a story. The sound filled the house, a deep, even thrum. I thought of arteries being cauterized. Rebecca stood in the archway with her hands clasped, mouth firm. You could see her dissociating, watching a funeral and a birth in the same minute. We're not erasing, she said quietly when she caught me watching. We're reclaiming. By the time the primer dried, the house felt empty. Not just empty of things, empty of personality, history, gravity. Marco popped open the color collection he jokingly labeled Rebecca, a palette of flipper whites and grays that made your teeth feel cold just looking at them. We sprayed every square inch, walls, wood paneling, trim, cabinet faces, even the switch and outlet covers. Gray mid-tone, semi-gloss. The kind that wants to be decisive, but never chooses a side. The kitchen counters and cabinets? Same gray. The bathroom vanity?
Gray.
The built-ins Rebecca had once stenciled with vines and hidden ladybugs?
Gray.
We left the tile floors alone. They were neutral enough to pass. When it dried, I walked through, and my chest tightened. The house looked dead. Not empty.
Dead.
Like someone vacuumed out the air and left the shell propped upright. In the living room, I reached for a spot where a mural used to live, and my fingers met a slick, indifferent surface. I imagined the landlord's daughter. I watched a 70-year-old art teacher cry into a cardboard box labeled brushes, while a landlord's son told her his princess wanted her house. Not a lease, not a conversation, an announcement. So the night before their big move-in, we pulled off the cottage facade, sanded every fairy tale mural to dust, and sprayed the place into a lifeless, soulless gray. When the U-Hauls rolled up, they didn't unload a single box. If you've ever been underestimated by people who think kindness equals weakness, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories where decency doesn't get stepped on.